All right. Super excited for episode 1. And I've got an amazing guest on today. He's a great friend of mine. He's also my running coach. He's had 15 years of PE teaching and coaching, so he's coached all different levels. He's run a amazing 2-hour 48. He might correct me after this, but 2-hour 48 marathon. Sub 10, maybe 11 now, or 12, 3-hour marathons. I don't know how he does it. Wife to Julie, daughter Emma, and he's just over 40 and he's still getting faster. So welcome to the show, Jimmy.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. The only thing that might not be true about that is still getting faster after 40, but I still think I'm on a upward trajectory, but we'll see. It's definitely
nice one.
It's still doable.
Well, let's talk about quickly what have you got lined up this year then in terms of personal races and things.
Actually, it is really unusual for me to have not entered anything. But I actually haven't entered a race yet this year. And the main reason for that is I had a place I qualified for the London Marathon, but I can't do it because it clashes with something. And the Paris Marathon is another one that I've done that's about the same time of year. We're actually, my daughter is a really keen tennis player and we're in Nice and Monaco area that week, so I couldn't do that either. So I'm in a bit of limbo at the moment, but I'm definitely looking for stuff. I'm training away, just kind of keeping a nice platform and deciding what that'll be, whether it'll be a duathlon I'm quite into actually at the moment, really enjoy cycling as well. Maybe a triathlon, and then there'll be various runs later in the year. Like, I really like the half marathon distance. That's probably the wrong thing to say on the Ultra Dads, podcast, but, I love half marathons. But yeah, I'm just looking for the next thing. No massive decisions, but that second half of the year, sort of September, October, there'll definitely be things going in there. I just haven't set it in stone yet.
Oh, cool. We might come back to that a little bit later in terms of races and stuff and what the goals are and sort of maintaining a base. But how did you get started in endurance sport and running in particular?
Yeah, so I love sport. I've always loved sport. And I played loads of different sports as a kid. And as I kind of got to my teens, people that know me will know that I'm not a giant, and I tried to play rugby at a decent level and things like this. So I realized that actually being fit and fast and having a good engine and a work rate was something that was to my advantage, because I was always going to lose out on the sort of physical side. I can just imagine some of my friends watching this and saying that I would lose out on the skill side as well compared to people like you. But I enjoyed the fitness side of training for those sports, and then played rugby through my sort of early to mid 20s. I got to about 27-ish. And, I was kind of just starting to look at other things. And, initially I just wanted to keep fit. And so, right, I'm not training twice a week with the rugby club and playing matches. So just do a bit of running to keep fit. And then just got the bug, entered a few 5Ks, 10Ks, enjoyed them, and thought, right, well, I've done a marathon when I was 21, because I was injured and couldn't play rugby. So I was like, fill my time. What will I do? And entered the London Marathon ballot with a friend. It was his idea, and I got in and he didn't. And then he abandoned me for the whole training process as well. So, that could have been. So I did that, and then I thought, right, well, I did quite well in that, considering I went in completely blind with no knowledge, and just basically went out for regular jogs, and I wonder what I could do. So first of all, keep fit, don't let things dwindle. And then I did the Edinburgh Marathon in 2012, I think it was. And I went out recklessly, not really knowing much about it still, and thinking, right, well, if I could do that, then I'm still quite fit. I'll just try and do the same thing. And so I ran 3:11 in London in 2001. So wind forward just over 10 years, and I got through about the first half in Edinburgh in roughly the same time. It's quite a hot day. And then it got hard later on. So I did 3:26, I think, for that. And I don't think I'd run more than about 12 miles in one training run. And so then it was right. I wonder if I trained properly, what could I do? And I had this idea of the 3-hour marathon in my head. And so just started digging into it in a bit more detail. And, what do you need to run a half marathon in to potentially be able to run a marathon in that sort of time? So I took that one on, and that later 2012, I ran 1:24 in the Glasgow half. And that was, right, this is quite cool. That's maybe roughly a sort of benchmark that might get me to the end of a marathon in the time that I want. And then got really into it, trained for Paris in 2013. That's right. And, broke 3 hours for the first time. So ran 2:56. And then ever since then, I've been, still doing them and trying to get faster. And I've got a little bit faster. And load the half marathons. I have done. I got you to thank for this. I'm not sure if that'll pick up on the camera. There you go. I got roped into doing the cancelled Ultra Tour of Edinburgh with you not long after lockdown during that sort of time. And I remember that. That was a really long way. So I have done one ultra marathon as well.
Nice one. Well, that was a fun experience. You seemed to just cruise, and I really suffered for that 57 kilometers. And I just remember there was only one pit stop. You actually stopped. You said, I think you hadn't had much breakfast, and you had a gel. You said, I'm actually just going to nip in here for a minute, and I think you had to have a quick toilet break around the 20K mark. But tell me a little bit. So maybe a couple of years of training, was it? Or tell us how your training sort of progressed and what sort of challenges you overcame during that period.
So when I started out, I had time on my hands because it was before my daughter was born. So, all that. So I've only got one child, but you've got three.
Yeah,
recently 3. So fantastic! Congratulations.
Thanks.
And so I guess that you just don't realize how much time you have on your hands, do you? Back then, but I guess then it was about training consistency. I'd done a couple of marathons, but I'd gone into them pretty blind, not knowing what to. A little bit of like arrogance of being young and thinking you're bulletproof, and then you find it quite easy for a little bit of time, and maybe the first 18 miles or so, and then it genuinely did get really hard after that, which I just wasn't prepared for. Doing that distance and then performing at that distance is something different to doing it. So I guess it was gradually educating myself about what you needed to do, and then also probably making realistic decisions with yourself based on how your training's gone, because you're not always in the same shape going into these events. And I think that's important, letting the ego get out of the way a little bit and making sensible decisions. So in those days, that was kind of relatively challenge free. And then since Emma's been on the scene and, busy job, as a PE teacher, family life as well. And so it's about training around that and not wanting to, miss family time to go training. My wife loves keeping fit. She goes to the gym. She's done various races as well. So, Julie's really supportive, and then it becomes about just helping each other and finding time for it. But things like getting up early and getting out there when you know you've got a long session to do, it's reasonably easy to find an hour here and there. But for a 2 to 3 hour training run, something like that, get up at the crack of dawn and get some breakfast in and get out there before they're up is always a good option, good way to do it.
Nice one. Tell us a little bit more about how you fit in the training. You're a PE teacher, so you're committed to the school day. You've got Emma, who obviously you've got to get to school. And then you've got your coaching as well. So you're currently coaching a number of athletes. And then you've also got to find time to have the family time, and then also got to find time for your own training. What does your maintenance period like? I know you haven't signed up to any races just now, but tell us a little bit about maintaining so that when that event or that new goal comes into the horizon, what are you doing? Like, tell us what about your training just now.
So I reckon in a normal week at the moment, without having the pressure of preparing for something, I'm doing about 4 aerobic sessions a week. 5 probably. Probably a minimum of 4. Occasionally in a bit busy week it will be 3, but that's probably quite rare for me. So that will largely be running, but I do cycle as well. I've got a turbo trainer, which is set up semi-permanently in the other room. So that's I actually, particularly for when you're getting older and you have to sort of manage your body a little bit differently to when you're in your 20s and 30s. So I really like cycling for runners as well, as a way of getting great training load in and aerobic development without the same impact of taking off all the time, takeoff landing. So that's a nice thing to have, and you can jump on it there, and I go on Zwift. So the interactive racing platform that's out there, which is quite a nice way of, rather than just sitting on a bike, I'm seeing my little me on a screen cycling around these cool places. It just sort of distracts you a little bit. And so I reckon, yeah, if I've got about 4 to 5 aerobic sessions a week, then I'm going to have a fairly decent platform that I can build off. I try and do 2 strength sessions a week as well. And that's twofold, really. One, from a performance perspective, but certainly from an injury prevention perspective. If I let my strength training dwindle, I definitely pick up more niggles at my age, particularly if you're trying to run to perform. So it's more stressful if you're trying to run quickly, or you're on challenging terrain, like going up big mountains in Arran like you've done. You have to have a base of strength there. But those sessions don't need to be 90 minutes at the gym. You can do really good sessions in 20 to 30 minutes if you need to. And you can get, I guess one of the things is getting a little bit creative and taking that you've got the ideal and then you've got reality. And rather than just going, oh, well, I can't do it, because even if you can fit in a 4-mile run in half an hour, or you do your key exercises in the gym rather than these prolonged, drawn out sessions, there's still a lot of value to be had from that.
Let's dig into exactly your timings then. Like, where are you fitting the training in just now? How long are the blocks? And just tell our audience, of those listening, what do you mean by an aerobic focus?
Yeah. Okay. So, the majority of the people I coach and the events that I prepare for are, most of them would be 10K and up. Okay. All the way to from 10K to ultra. So they're going to be sports that are very much dominated by aerobic fitness. So there may be periods of time, short periods of time, like you can see the clock, pointing over that way. You can see the clock at the end of the race, and you've got 200 meters to go, and you've got 40 seconds to get your PB. You might need to break into a sprint. So that goes a little bit anaerobic, but for the majority of the time, it's about aerobic development being the priority. So, an exercise intensity that you can sustain for long periods of time. And that's probably anything from 20 minutes up. I think if you look at some of the scientific graphs, you can look at how aerobic, anaerobic, something like an 800-meter race is. And there's a high anaerobic component, but there's also, the majority of it is aerobic. So it's fueled by a ready supply of oxygen.
Okay. Well, you enlightened me when we first started working together. Probably a huge blind spot for me was zone 2 training. And I wondered why we'd never done any of it being in professional sport and rugby. Why? Probably because it's not really an endurance sport, rugby, but I could see huge benefits of doing it in the off season. Tell us a little bit more about how to find your zone 2 in that aerobic sort of zone, the easy way and maybe the slightly more technical.
Yeah. So I guess, the first thing to say is zone 2 is a relatively low intensity, so it should feel quite easy. And when people are time crunched, they often go out the front door, they pick a pace that feels good rather than being, strategic about what they're going to do in a specific session. And so they quite often fall into, a higher intensity than that. Zone 2 has got massive endurance benefits because when you're operating at that intensity, you can keep going for a long time, which is great for building endurance. You get metabolic adaptations that happen in the muscle. One of the main ones is that you develop more mitochondria, and your mitochondria, which are they're like the energy, they're the engines of the muscle, if you like. And they help you burn fat as fuel. And whether we like it or not, we've got lots of storage of fat, whereas carbohydrate that fuels endurance performance in many ways, we've got about, let's say, up to 90 minutes if we're fresh and well rested, stored in the body. So if you can become more effective at burning fat as fuel, you're going to potentially be a better athlete. Okay. And it also stops you burning through your carbohydrate stores as quickly. And one of the adaptations that you get from doing well structured and disciplined low heart rate zone 2 or below zone 1 training is that you develop more mitochondria, and they get, they function to a higher level. And so that allows you to gradually start using fat as fuel more effectively. Now, the other thing that happens is that even though a lot of the development goes on at this low intensity type of training, it also supports performance at higher intensity. So, people will probably have heard of lactate. When you're racing fast, like 5K, 10K, lactate starts to build up, or it's produced much faster. And it is processed for energy purposes. It's a form of fuel in the mitochondria. But the problem is, if it builds up to a level where it can't be cleared, it goes into the blood, then other problem byproducts build up as well, like hydrogen ions. And that causes quite rapid onset of fatigue. So by training at a low intensity, and there are so many articles, run slower to race faster, that kind of theme. That's the sort of whistle stop tour of why. So how do you find it? There are various different ways. Quite a lot of some of the best endurance coaches in the world talk about the talk test. So a really simple way of being roughly in the right area without having to get too scientific about measuring it is, can you hold a full conversation? And by that, you're running maybe with a friend and you're talking a little bit like we are here. Now it has to be a low intensity to do that. If you can talk and hold a full conversation, then you're probably in roughly the right place. If you're having to take sort of prolonged breaks between sentences or words or quick short answers, then you'd be at a higher intensity than that. And I think that's been proven to correlate quite well with laboratory tests as well. One that I use because it's quite accessible for most people is setting it at below 75% of your maximum heart rate. So in order to do that, you have to have a chest strap, because the wrist heart rate still isn't accurate enough to get a good enough measure. So you have to have a chest strap. You do a max heart rate test, which is a hard test, but quite simple. And from that, you can get all of your zones cascading down from whatever the reading is that you get during that test.
Okay. What's your maximum heart rate, and what does your zone 2 zone? So what are you trying to get to beats per minute? Are you trying to get to the top of the zone 2, or just in between, or what does that look like?
Yeah, sure. My max heart rate is about 175. Okay. So my zone 2 is roughly 130 beats per minute at 75% of that. Okay. So the very top of zone 2. So I will regularly run sessions that are between 115 beats per minute and 125. And some people find it quite annoying and stressful having to check their watch all the time. And to be honest with you, I find that once you've got good experience with this type of training, you learn what it feels like. And so you can roughly be there. The sort of things you got to be aware of is heart rate climbs quite quickly as soon as you go up a hill and things like that. And, one of the experts in this, world experts in this area, a guy called Stephen Seiler, he talks about some of the fittest athletes in the world in endurance sport will stop and walk up hills if it's a day when they're deliberately trying to keep their heart rate low, because they don't want it to spike at all. They know that the hard day is coming. So the strategic hard training as well. And so that they're as fresh as they can be, their body is recovering between the hard sessions. They want these sessions to be deliberately quite easy.
Would they at that point stay off the mountain, or would they change if they're on trail? Would they then go to maybe more flat, or what do you see there?
So we live fairly near the sea. We're not too far from one another. So it's not that hard to pick a flattish route. So I'm doing a lot of my running on fairly flat routes, which maybe has its disadvantages at times, because running in the hills can develop different capacities that can be useful for endurance. And when you were doing your ultra tour of Arran, we deliberately got you into the hills for exactly that reason, going up steep hills and descending as well. For me, I'm on the flat. Would they? I think if they had the ability, if they wanted it to be a really easy run, they'd probably try and keep it relatively flat and avoid hills. But that said, if you read books about the top Ethiopian runners, for example, where they live is reasonably hilly, and they don't avoid hills and runs like that. But what they will do is go really slowly up them if they need to. So they're more than willing to manage the intensity of their training really closely and get away from the ego of whatever average pace on Strava says. For example, on Strava, I did a session last week. Try not to bang the drum here. I was quite pleased with it. It was 8 1-kilometer reps with 2-minute breaks in between. And so that I can keep the output in the 1K reps high, I walk or stand relatively still for the 2-minute rests. You don't always have to do that. Sometimes you have very deliberate active recovery, and there are sessions where actually your rest period might still be quite fast. It's vast getting into different types of sessions. But this particular session was really easy rest. So I think on Strava, it looked like my average speed was about 440. But then if you go into the workout breakdown, my reps were done at sub 340 pace for those. So 340 per K, which for me is holding a pretty decent speed. So someone will see that as 440 for 9K or whatever it was and think that's not a great session, but actually it was a really good session. And I think we had a chat earlier about it, that got to let ego get out of the way with these sessions. If it's a better session if you're 10 or 15% slower, 15 seconds per kilometer slower, it's better training and it's a better training effect. And I find that people sometimes take a little bit of time to settle into that. It's called polarized training for people that want to look it up. But once they start doing the genuinely hard sessions, they realize what difficult is. And they're more willing to go easy in the easier stuff.
Yeah, I remember when you got me to start doing zone 2, I was cruising down the cycle track in Edinburgh, and this young girl just absolutely smashed past me and lapped me a couple of times, and just made me feel so like, oh man, what am I doing? She's just absolutely hammering me. But I had to like sort of put that to one side and think, okay, that's not my goal to run fast right now. And my goal is not maybe what her goal is. And maybe this training is going to benefit me more in the long run. So that was a difficult process to go through, but it definitely worked, because when I got to the ultra, I was in really good shape. Let's talk a little bit about what you would recommend then for any dads that are listening. What if they're not quite put a flag in the sand yet and picked a race, and they want to get back into it, or they previously were a runner? What would you recommend in terms of keeping the motivation up and getting the training done? What would you recommend?
I think most people feel really good once they've trained. I've never been a very good early morning trainer. I'm definitely better sort of lunchtime, early evening. One of the benefits that I've got at the moment is because my coaching business has been developing really nicely, I've reduced my hours as a PE teacher. So 2 days a week, I'm working on my coaching business, which is fantastic. But it also gives me the ability to try and manage my time and go for a run during the day, which is great. But other than that, I would be fitting it in at other times. And it's, try and work with your other half and try and find times where you can get that time in the diary, so that you can go out. Getting a lot of people that I coach, they're unbelievably dedicated, and they've got busy lives, busy jobs, busy families. So they've got the same pressure as all of us. But once they've established that habit, they keep it going. So I think it's probably this twofold. There's one, fitting it in, but before that is establishing the basic habits to start with. So rather than going from nothing to exercising every day, can you find time to do 3 days a week? Can you find a way of, could you do 20 minutes before work, or before the kids are up, before the rest of the house starts stirring? It's looking for things like that. People put it into their commute. So whether that's getting the train part of the way or the bus part of the way to work and then running the rest, or busing in, running home, is a nice way of finding time where it doesn't clash with as many other things. And I think that in most cases, people, if they get creative and they're really honest with themselves, they can do that. It does require sacrifice, if you want to be able to find time and prioritize, you might have to get up early and do it before everybody else is up and busy and demanding of your time. But it is very doable.
Yeah. I like the mindset of treating your body like a Formula One car, and you've got to put the good stuff in, and then also keep it going. You've got to warm up, and then also warm down. So putting in good habits around that training. In terms of, say if a new dad or coming back dad to training 3 times a week, 20 minutes a session. What are those sessions? Is there 3 aerobic sessions? Is there 1 tempo session? What do you recommend there?
Yeah, I would say if somebody's doing 3 sessions a week of, say, let's say they're relatively short, so 20 minutes to half an hour, trying to build up that initial base. There is absolutely nothing wrong, first of all, with all of those sessions being easy. People tend to overestimate the value of doing high intensity training. And high intensity training, it's riskier. Like, you're more likely to get injured in a session like that. But it also gets easier with the better your base is. So if you're just starting out, and you did 3 30-minute sessions a week, and that's at a nice slow pace, and you did that for 6 weeks, that's going to help you start putting a foundation in place that you can then build off, rather than having to jump straight to what looks like, or training should look like this. I'm a big believer that for people that get training right, it should not feel like every session is a slog. A lot of training should feel actually quite easy. It shouldn't all feel hard. But then when you do the hard stuff, that then can be genuinely hard. But certainly, before we even get into percentages of how much high intensity and all of the stuff, and there are brilliant graphs, there are loads of studies that have been done on this sort of stuff. There's loads of information out there. Is firstly, find time, and then secondly, do that consistently. And those are probably the two biggest pillars of training: is spend time doing it and do it as consistently as you can over 4 to 6 weeks, and you will get a benefit from that.
What about strength and conditioning then? Are we doing strength and conditioning within those, or are we just doing the 3 sessions? Are we trying to get a 20-minute session strength and conditioning once a week, twice a week, maybe?
Good question. And that's always dictated by how easily people can get access to facilities. Some people I coach have got squat racks in the garage, for example. Some people don't have access to any of that sort of equipment. So body weight stuff can be great training. If you've got access to equipment or a gym, brilliant. What I would say is that not every week has to look the same. So it may be that 1 in every 6 sessions that you do is a strength session. Okay. It may be that if you can fit in 5 sessions a week, then 3 of them are running focused and 2 of them are strength focused. It may be that you find a way of incorporating some strength work into one of your runs, for example. So you do a 10-15 minute run. You then do some squats, lunges, press ups, maybe some short hill sprints, things like that. Step ups on a bench, that kind of thing in the local park. And then you jump back. So there are all sorts of different ways. I think one thing that we're like, physiology and fitness development doesn't know anything about the 7-day week. Whereas we are all totally tied into them, and we tend to have more time on Saturday, Sunday than we have the other days. So we try and fit our longer session in there, or get one really good session done at the weekend. And then if we can squeeze something in, but there's absolutely no reason you can't have a 10-day training cycle or a 21-day training cycle, for example. And, through that, you can divvy up the strength sessions through 21 days rather than thinking, right, I've got to do this week, and next week has to look like that or it's a failure.
Yeah, for sure. What about mobility then? I know there's probably a lot of people listening have got aches and pains, previous injuries like ACL. Tell us a little bit more about prehab and mobility work that we could be doing.
Yeah. So there's some really cost-effective options. If you can get something like a hip circle, everybody can do air squats at the house. Assuming you got no issue with your Achilles, you can do some reactive stuff like jump squats and things like that. There's great ways of doing body weight training at home. And that just keeps you The most important thing about maintaining strength is for injury prevention as much as it is for performance. So it just stabilizes you around the joints. Bone density will be more positive for people that strength train, things like that. If you're doing a good strength training session, you should have good mobility within that as well. So you imagine you do a half squat versus a full squat, you're getting great range of range of motion around the ankle, the knee, the hip, things like that. So there is mobility in strength as well. The other thing I like to do is when we get that time to relax late in the evening, I just do a little bit of stretching in front of the TV, and I find it quite relaxing. YouTube yoga, yoga with Adrienne is brilliant. There's loads of stuff. There's other ones as well, but she does things like yoga for runners. And that can be anything from a 45-minute session that you don't have to find time for, or it can be a 8-minute, TLC routine for runners, getting some good mobility through all of the key joints and movements. And, I think for people that are busy at work, desk jobs, that's something that's probably really important. We're sitting down a lot and hunched towards the computer possibly. So, postural correction and muscle balance and things like that. People, when they get these niggles, they're quite happy to go and spend a lot of money going to a physio. And that's often very, very worthwhile and money well spent. But I work with a couple of fantastic physios, and, they will often say, people come for the information, but they don't see the value in, well, here are some calf raises, here are some glute bridges, because they might be used to going to the gym and squatting a decent weight. And how can that be of value versus that? But actually, it builds really good capacity in different areas of the body that can really help. So finding a way to do that is important, particularly as you get older.
Yeah, for sure. We'll just change tack slightly here, but I mean, I was always told in terms of nutrition, 30 minutes or 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of a workout. Tell us a little bit about the fueling side. Like, what does your nutrition look like? How do you stay so trim, mate? And maybe there's some little habits that you have put in place. You can sort of take it where it leads, I guess, if you're doing any supplements or anything. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I've had nutrition in my undergrad. I had nutrition in my postgrad, and I certainly wouldn't class myself as an expert on it. I've probably got decent workable knowledge. I have probably when I started getting into endurance sport, I started thinking, oh, right, so nutrition, what does that look like? And like most people, they'll probably think calories. And so I went MyFitnessPal, put my ideal weight in, and it churned out some unrealistically low number that I had to try and keep to. And I don't get hugely carried away with that, but that said, I was logging into MyFitnessPal every day for years, and I used it not because I was too obsessive about it, but I just found it was quite a nice way of keeping me honest. And if I had a bad day where, I don't know, let's say, you go out to a restaurant and you blow your calorie content out of the water, it just helped me. It didn't bother me too much doing that, but then it would be a nice one to go, okay, well, let's just make sure that we dial things back a little bit over the next few days so that you can go and do that and it's not destructive. I think to an extent, it's probably helped my nutrition education, because you start to realize that you eat the same foods quite often. And also that, you then start to learn what's in them. So you can make choices without having to look at an app. Absolutely no doubt that my nutrition education went through the roof when I met Howard Hurst, who was he is a professor in sports nutrition at the University of Central Lancashire, where I did my master's in strength and conditioning. And he's an ultra endurance athlete. He's an Ironman, completed several Ironmans. He loves his endurance sport, but he's worked in pro football, pro rugby league. And that just, he's got, my level is here and he's way off the charts, and being able to tap into him was fantastic. And I got him to do an analysis of my diet. And then I decided it'd be really worthwhile to pay him to design a 7-day nutrition plan for me. And I think once when I got that, I was preparing for the Manchester Marathon. And I stuck to it like glue. I was religiously stuck to it, and I got in race shape so easily. And that, in terms of, I was doing loads of training, but I got down to my optimal racing weight quite quickly, and then found it really easy to stick to. Didn't find it too much of a chore. He designed the meals around foods that I like. So I think that, yeah, there's probably two things there. I took control of it myself because I wanted to for a long time. But then when I wanted to know more and get it absolutely right, I went and asked an expert, and that was invaluable. What I don't do is, Howard, I'm sorry if you see this, I don't, between races, so at the moment, I very much use all of the principles that he's given me. No doubt about that. I don't necessarily stick 100% to the nutrition plan, but if I start preparing for a race, I'll dial straight back into that because I know that it works.
Nice. Well, tell us what your post training snack or post train. Do you actually take something post or pre?
Okay, so it depends on the session. If it's going to be really long, which is the bit of training that I don't do very well, probably historically, I cut corners around that, and my race performances would show you that. I would get up probably about try and eat about 2 to 3 hours before. So I'd be up really early, and that would be things like porridge, maybe with a little bit of honey, wholemeal toast, really trying to get the carbs in for me. If it's a long session, then I would be fueling within it. So I can tell you a little bit more about that if you want to know what I would do there. I think one of the really important things is, without getting too caught up in what type of gels I have or different types of products, it's more, most people don't put enough in. And then if you're doing an event that is lasting hours and you're pacing it well, fatigue is going to probably be caused by substrate depletion. So you're running out of energy, you're running out of carbohydrate. So if you don't put enough in, at some point, performance will start to dip. And there's a multitude of different ways of doing that. I use gels to do it normally. If I'm on the bike, I use chews and carbohydrate drink and things. But and then after training, if it is a hard session, I would always try and hit the 20 to 30 minute window. And that would be some sort of like healthy carb protein snack. In the past, I have used a supplement for that, which is called Sysrego. You can buy that from sort of your sports nutrition stores, and that's exactly that. It's a carbohydrate protein mix to promote recovery. Because I get quite geeky about the science, as you know, the optimal window is about 20 to 30 minutes after.
Yeah.
And the reality is that if you miss it here and there, it's not going to make any difference. But if you do 6 months of great training, and athlete A and athlete B, they're exactly the same as one another, and this person gets their nutrition absolutely bang on, this person eats the same things but with different timing, this person's probably going to get more from that training program. So it's about stimulating the recovery and growth from training by timing of good nutrition. So about 20 to 30 minutes after is optimal.
Say we don't have the supplements. What's your real food option?
So in fact, this is probably more often than not. I haven't used the supplement for ages, actually. I have something like a healthy homemade shake. So full fat milk, berries, a little bit of honey. You could chuck some oats in it and then mix it in the NutriBullet, and that's just as good.
Is that all? Anything else in there?
For after, no, that would be like a normal go-to, quite basic. But and there are people, if you've got a protein powder, you could put some of that in if you want. I know people that do that, but yeah, I kind of stick with as many natural foods as I can.
That's right. Well, we're almost out of time, but is there anything you'd like to say to those listening today?
Yeah, I think it is a challenge when you're busy to find time. And what I try and get people to do is to think about having time for themselves is also a good thing. Going out for a run, being in nature is a really healthy thing to do, regardless of whether you're preparing for a race or not. It's relaxing and it's a bit of a break from our sort of like busy lifestyles. So it's a great thing to do anyway. Don't get caught up in doing too much high intensity. I find that people that don't stick with plans, sometimes it's because they try and jump from doing not very much training to training every day. And that's a little bit of an unrealistic leap in most cases, both from a time perspective, but also from their body's got to gradually adapt. So have a bit of a gradual build up process to it. And then the other one is not every training session has to be hard. So for me, if I go out, if I'm running or cycling, probably 1 in every 4 sessions is hard. I'm probably doing about 1 hard session a week at the minute. If I'm doing more volume and I'm building up to an event, I can probably cope with 2. But I also listen to my body as I get older. So if I do a session and it leaves me really sore for days afterwards, then firstly, it was probably too hard from where I am at the moment. And the other one being, that I would quite happily just have easy days following that to allow me to recover, rather than thinking, right, I've got to do the next hard session 48 hours later. So don't think it's not worthwhile if it's relatively short and easy. Easy training is good training.
Yeah, nice one. Well, Jimmy, we're just about finished here with our time, and I know you've got a busy schedule. I really appreciate you coming on and being my number 1 guest. To you, the listener, hopefully you've got a few nuggets, gold nuggets out there from Jimmy. If you want to check out Jimmy a bit more, Jimmy, where can we find you?
My website is endurancesportperformance.com. And so you can go on there. You can contact me through the website. I am on Instagram. Should know my handle, but let's make sure that I get it right. It is, there we go. Jimmy_endurance_coach. So if somebody wants to get in touch, they can go and have a look at that if they want to.
Brilliant. And from our side, Jimmy, you can also find Jimmy in the Ultra Dad community. Any dads listening, you're welcome to join. We'll put a link in the show notes. And Jimmy's in there, quite active in there, and he's full of gold nuggets, giving advice for guys, dads starting off on their journey, either to ultra or even sort of smaller distance in halves and even 5K. So, Jimmy, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in.
Yeah. Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Cheers, Nick.